We will call to order the March 21st, 2018 meeting of the Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission. Record should show that we have all members present. First order of business is to look at the agenda. We have any changes or additions to that agenda from staff or from anybody else?
Not from staff, Mr. Chairman.
Let's have a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. That motion carries. We need to approve minutes. Any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Chairman, I'll move to approve.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, our first regular agenda item this morning is a rezoning petition. Mr. Hadley, you're going to introduce that for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This first request is a zone change from limited commercial LC to medium density residential R2. It's in the state third edition. Currently, I think the applicant has a vacant lot there and wants to pursue either building a single family home or a single family attached. And I believe they're here. They can address kind of what their intent is. They could get a special use permit in the existing zone to build a home, but I don't think they have decided what they want to build yet. So with that, I would let the applicant maybe address that.
Mr. Messer?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Zoning Board. My name is Neil Messer, and I'm here on behalf of Schwab Messer Construction to request a zoning change on Lot 4, Block 1, State 3rd Edition. The request is made on behalf to entice our opportunity to do something on that particular lot. When we brought this subdivision forth a number of years ago, Ed Couton had asked, actually, we had this original whole street on 8th Street proposed to be R2. Ed had asked us to make some available commercial lots on the western edge because Roars was coming in with their subdivision, and they were going to have the whole Fairway Street corridor zoned as commercial. And so we complied with that to get the zoning approval. Part of the problem is we don't have access to Fairway Street from that lot as they do further to the west. And so at this point we developed the R2 lots on the eastern edge of our property. This lot is, like I mentioned, currently zoned commercial. And when we sold to, as you'll see on your maps or information that was provided, we sold one of the lots to Consolidated, and one of our provisions when we sold to them under the commercial concept was they would do their best to make that building have a number of residential aspects to it. They've done that to the best of their ability. So we believe if we put a residential structure in there, it would best suit the mix that's going on there. And we also do have a number of requests from individuals who would like to do something there. So having said that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Messer? Just for the benefit of the public, currently the lot has commercial on one side and it has a multiple dwelling on the other side, correct?
And Mr. Chairman, all the neighbors have given responses in favor of this request, and staff would recommend approval as well.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Messer. Okay, this is a proposed zoning change, so we will open up for comment from the public. If anybody at the meeting here has any comments or questions about this request, please step forward, state your name, and give us any comments that you have. Anybody? Any comments? It appears there are none, so we will close the public hearing. Any further comments by commissioners? Not, we'll look for a motion.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of REZ-002-18, zone change from limited commercial to medium-density residential, as depicted in attachment A, and meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Not, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries. Okay, our next two items concern the same piece of property. And Mr. Josephson, you're going to start the discussion?
No,
No? Okay.
that was a error. Mr. Chairman, this is a future land use amendment and a zone change for future land use from mixed use to industrial for 6 lots in the Great Lakes subdivision. It's kind of a new concept we're looking at for the overlay zone that was created north and south along Highway 22. We have 2 applications in front of you today that will look at deed restricting themselves to meet the intent of that overlay corridor and apply for these zone changes. With that, I probably would have more to add later on, but I think the applicant would like to discuss their proposed deed restrictions and what they envision. And some of the past, I know that there's a number of realtors and folks that have supported this request because commercial has not moved and been sold. There's been one commercial property that was sold, developed, opened, and since closed in this area. And so I think that there is a little bit of information that they can share with us that maybe would help support this concept.
Okay, before the applicant comes up, would you just, for the public, would you describe where this piece of property is located?
It's 6 lots along Highway 22 in the Great Lakes subdivision, which is north of the City of Dickinson in our ETZ. It's platted as a commercial, light industrial, and industrial development. There's 2 tenants there, I believe, 2 owners that are on those. There's a storage building facility and SM fencing.
Okay. Who wants to speak for the applicant? Mr. Schmeling?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Don Schmeling with Continental Real Estate, and I'm here to represent the owners and developer of Great Lakes First Subdivision. As Hadley had mentioned here, we have a commercial strip along Highway 22. It's approximately 2 miles north of Dickinson, just south of 32nd Street up there. Lots of industrial in the area. Solarby used to be there, now it's Medora Corporation. Nuvera, formerly, can't say it right now, but a trucking company up in there. Trucking to the north, industrial to the east. Anyhow, we've got a strip of commercial on there, and the reason the commercial, in my opinion, was put in was back when this subdivision was approved in 2014, I mean, we were exploding with growth, and I think the city really wanted to protect the corridor, keep it a nice-looking, more manicured looking corridor coming in and from the city of Dickinson, to the city of Dickinson. In my opinion, that I understand the concept. We're trying to stay with that concept, but a commercial strip out there just is not working. Got some letters from other realtors, and I've talked to several that there's just no call, no demand, no interest in locating a commercial business that far out of town. Our developers have put a substantial amount of money in there with moving lots and lots of dirt, bringing in all the utilities, concrete streets. All we're trying to do is make that property saleable, but still stay with the intent, I believe, was the city's idea of keeping that a nice-looking corridor. So we'd like to do that through deed restrictions for those commercial lots that we hope to change to limited industrial. And I guess just a comment too, I see in the agenda here, it talks about changing the general commercial to limited industrial, but there are also some limited industrial lots. If we succeed in that, we'd like to change to general industrial. It was in my application, so just wanted to call that to your attention. I think, like I said, with the deed restrictions, I think we can keep the city's intent with the landscaping, planting trees, screen fencing, building facades, and so on. So we're open to doing that. In looking through all the possible business types that could go in under limited industrial, the only one that we found that might be not fit in that type of a overlay corridor would be open warehousing, so we've addressed that in our deed restrictions as well. So I guess I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Schmeling, I don't think we were aware of the request from limited to general industrial. Which lots would that?
Okay, on limited industrial would be lots 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10 of Block 1, and Lot 7 of Block 2. It was in my applications. I just noticed it here this morning that it was not included.
So did this get noticed that way?
What you have in front of you is notice, so that might have not made the notice for the process, because we were focusing on that front portion. Didn't realize we were doing that too. I guess we took this right off I took this right off the legal and the application, but
Well, I still have copies of application in my paperwork here, but yeah, it did include those. The ones that were limited industrial on the plot were lots 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10 of Block 1, and then Lot 7 of Block 2. So that was our intent. We moved the limited industrial to the edge of the highway, and then the balance of that out there would be changed from limited to general industrial.
remember discussing it on your map, yeah.
So if it was not noticed, where does that leave us?
That leaves us that we should notice those lot amendments, proposed lot amendments, and move it forward without, obviously without an application. But it'll have to follow this subsequently after this application goes through. It doesn't affect the Flume amendment and the other zone change.
We do have I guess to muddy the water a little bit, we do have interest in a particular limited industrial lot right now that is contingent upon that particular zoning change, so I don't know how we can address that either, but it's kind of important.
There shouldn't be any problem taking it up at the next meeting, I would presume.
Shouldn't be, no. Nope.
Okay, I guess we have no choice but to move forward with just the general commercial to the limited today, at today's meeting. Questions from commissioners or comments?
Mr. Chairman, do we have to list the lots that he wants done then? When in the motion or not?
No, because apparently only the general commercial portion, the orange that you have on your map,
Right,
those are the only lots that were.
okay. All I need to know.
Mr. Hadley, can you tell us, please give us a summary of what uses are allowed in limited industrial as opposed to general commercial?
Well, they allow a lot more outdoor storage. They allow a little higher uses as far as equipment, a little more operation as far as noise, manufacturing. There's a little more light manufacturing that are allowed there. Other than that, that's really the difference, the outdoor storage, and with the screening that's proposed. One thing I was going to add to this request to the surrounding land uses, just so you know, the north is industrial, existing industrially zoned land. East is industrial, west is industrial, and south is light industrial. So it does fit in that particular region as well. The deed restrictions are something that would allow us to allow that to develop similarly to its area, but also keep the intent of keeping the corridor cleaned up and nice for entry into the city of Dickinson. So I think that obviously staff supports that concept. This was a concept that we talked about quite a bit. Didn't really know how the Planning Commission or the City Commission would feel upon hearing it, but I think it does cover what the intent was for the overlay corridor for Highway 22. Would like to get some discussion on how you feel about it, so in the future, if there's more that come up, this is something that you would like to entertain.
I guess that would be my question. If we change this, how many more are we gonna see come that we in our overlay district we said was general commercial?
We did have a couple stripes of commercial in our north and south of overlay, in the overlay corridor that were commercial. So we may see more. It's not the vast majority, but there are probably 10 other properties, I'd have to guess, that could potentially come in and do the same kind of an application.
Mr. Hadley, there's no question that the requirements of the overlay corridor will still apply, correct?
Correct.
Whether it's general commercial or light industrial or limited industrial.
But the deed restriction sends it home, and it also pushes back those uses away from the corridor.
Sure. And that's good. But even without the deed restrictions, the overlay corridor will still control that first 300 or 400 feet, correct?
Yes, the corridor would still be in place. Yeah, we're not getting rid of the corridor. It's just we're enhancing it by pushing the uses that aren't compatible, that you didn't seem were compatible when this was adopted, away from the corridor further to that 400-foot level.
I think that the overlay corridor ordinance accomplishes what we were trying to do some years ago in zoning this property general commercial along the highways. I think the overlay corridor takes care of that. At the time we started doing this, we didn't have the overlay corridor ordinance. We do now. And I'd like to hear more discussion, but I think that what we're trying to achieve along our corridors still will happen.
Mr. Chairman, I feel this makes sense just because I don't think anybody's going to throw up a gas station on the corner when you have the hub to the south and the county line to the north. As commercial goes, I just don't think it's attractive now with those other facilities sitting in the area. So I think this makes sense, at least to develop this property. So we're not just looking at empty lots.
Just a comment, I guess, for myself too. If you remember what that property looked like prior to the developers coming in, I think it's been enhanced substantially just with the dirt that's been moved, the old farmstead that was removed, et cetera. So putting the concrete street through there, it does look a lot nicer than it did previously, so. It just the commercial strip, I like Mr. Decker saying, I just don't see that happening out there. There's just not any interest, no demand, especially with all the adjacent to the city of Dickinson and within the city. There's just not any, I don't know what else you're gonna do with that property out there. It just seems like it should be an industrial area.
Anything else before we move into the public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Schmeling.
Thank you.
I guess before we go to public hearing, we're just looking at a flume revision first, huh? So if we go back to our agenda, we're looking at item number 2 before we get to the actual rezoning. With that, any more comments or questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Scott. That the comment that Scott, our mayor. Anyway, it is a long ways out there, and no one is picking it up. The commercial's been there for 7 years, I think, right, Mr. Schmeling? So I think limited industrial will probably move it so we can get some revenue off of it, and tax money, whatever.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, we're looking for a motion on item number 2 with the future land use amendment. And help me, I don't think a flume amendment requires a public hearing. Am I wrong? It does require it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then we will open up this discussion to the public. Anybody have any comments or questions from the public, please step forward as to amending the future land use map for these parcels of property. Anybody, any comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And unless there are more comments from commissioners, we need a motion.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of REZ-001-18, zone change from general commercial to limited industrial.
I think we need to do the first.
Or are we, am I in the wrong one?
You're on item number 2, Shirley.
Yeah, prior one, on page 2.
Whoops.
FLM.
The FLM.
Okay, back it up. I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of FLM-001-18, FLM amendment from mixed use to industrial, as depicted in attachment A and meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now we'll move to item 3, the rezoning. Anything else to add, Mr. Hadley?
No, sir, I think we've pretty much discussed the issues that we have there. I will renotice and get the other lots on there for our next meeting.
And the other lots will not require flume amendment?
That's
We'll
correct.
just go to the zoning.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, again, we'll open up to the public. Any comments on the actual rezoning of these parcels? Anybody from the public? There are no comments, so anything else from commissioners? And now we need the motion on the rezoning.
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of RAZ-001-18, zone change from general commercial to limited industrial as depicted in attachment A, as meeting all the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
We have a
Second.
motion, and we have a second. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, Motion carries. Okay, we'll move to item number 4, Mr. Hadley, 4 and 5.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is another future land use amendment, and then also a subsequent zone change. It's down south of town, a 16-acre parcel, used to be owned by Steffes Corporation. Currently, it's a lot that has tanks stored on it, has a tree row planted around it, just out of the manufacturing area there that they produce them. Westerman is requesting a similar request to what you just heard. They're basically going from mixed use to industrial for the future land use, and then, you know, subsequently going to industrial as well with the zone change. Very similar. Had discussions with these folks when they first came to town, and these two applications came in together. Not really planned that way, but it actually worked out quite well because it brought the discussion up there. Obviously, in the overlay corridor too, they're going to build quite a large building to house the facility that their tank facility there. Do a lot of site improvements, have an office facility on site, do a lot of landscaping, and they do have some schematic plans of what the facade and what their site is going to look like. So with that, I'd maybe have them do the same thing as explain their intent and why, you know, why they support this too, because I'm in support of this concept, but it was in collaboration with these two applicants to try to move this forward, to get the planning commission to discuss this type of change in policy, I guess, if you will.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hadley. There is one difference here, though, if I'm not wrong, in that the usage here was previously approved via a special use permit, correct?
It was approved as a special use permit for Steffes Corporation, but that expired when the ownership changed.
Okay.
So right now, it's basically an unapproved use with the current owner.
But we're just making permanent what we had previously approved, essentially in a temporary.
Right, in a different way, yes.
Okay, who is representing the applicant? Any more comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering, here representing the owner, Westerman Inc. They're doing business here as Worthington Industries. They do currently have a facility directly north of this property where they manufacture steel tanks for oil production. They're looking for this future land use map amendment to ultimately rezone the property to limited industrial to allow for expansion of their operations here. They plan to produce additional oil and gas production equipment at this new facility. They need to expand their operations to keep up with a growing oil and gas industry in North Dakota. This would be, as I said, an expansion of existing industrial uses that are already in place directly to the north, so we feel it's consistent with current uses that are there today. No additional city services would be required on top of what is currently planned. They would be served by a septic field and rural water in the area, so at this time no additional city infrastructure would be required. Similar to the previous applicant, it's been found that this area is just not desired for residential or commercial mixed uses as it's currently designated. It's along a Highway 22, access is difficult. We're pulling commercial properties out of the heart of Dickinson where they're more desirable. So similar to they previously stated, we just find that industrial seems to be a better fit for this site. Any concerns with the appearance, making this an appealable gateway corridor to Dickinson, as you previously stated, are already addressed by your corridor overlay district. That affects the first 400 feet of this property, which is just under half of the property. So most of this site is going to have to be improved to meet those requirements. As part of your application, we have included a few renderings of possible quality of building that would be put on this site. The owner is currently working through approximately 70% design plans for a building, working on pricing, and the rendering that we show is the quality of development that they're looking at placing on this site. We feel it's a large step up from what is there today, and it will be an enhancement to this area. On top of the corridor overlay requirements, we are proposing tree rows, screened fencing around any outdoor storage areas on the site, not just within the corridor overlay district, to help buffer any future uses that would come in around this property. And I guess if there are any questions as well, a few owners, representative from the owner are present as well. Michael Getz, who came in from Ohio, where their corporate office is located, is here. Randy Emter, the local plant manager, and Casey Ritz, an engineer at their facility here today as well to address any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schrank. Anybody have questions or comments?
So, are we looking at just doing this one little spot? Or are we gonna change it all?
We're just changing that 16.6 acre parcel at this point.
So we're kind of spot zoning, technically.
Technically. I don't know, I think south of there is probably ag, huh?
It's all ag.
It's a,
So, you know, any proposed development would need zoning one way or the other.
And a flume change, because this obviously is already in there.
Well, the flume, yes.
That's what I'm assuming it is. I mean, we're just changing the flume on one little spot. Should we be looking at doing the whole thing?
Too late for this meeting.
we could surely revisit and relook at, and Stephen and I have talked about doing some revision of our flume map designations. I think that's something that we probably do need to revisit for the area, but, you know, their application, they can't necessarily apply for everyone unless they went to coordinate the effort. The mixed-use designation that is on there right now is a little bit of a spot.
I mean, nobody
So-
applied for this. We did this, right? As a city? Nobody made the, I mean, this, we
Yes.
did the flume.
That's
Yes.
correct, yeah. We did the entire city and the ETZ, yes.
So to change it, somebody'd have to apply, or we can just change it?
We can change it, we can have the same, go through the same process and do public hearings and change all of it if we want to.
I'm just saying, if we're gonna change that one little spot, we should look at the whole thing.
We can, I think it's gonna take a little more time than,
It doesn't
looking
have
at-
to be today, I'm just saying that it's something
Yeah.
we should.
We surely can, and it is kind of on our list. If they have support to do that, we'll definitely move forward on that this year.
You know, let me ask the dumb question. What exactly is the definition of mixed use?
Mixed use, Stephen, you're the expert on the mixed use definition. He corrected me on it already, so I'll let him.
Oh,
Ooh.
sorry about that. I wasn't planning on speaking today. Steve
Now you're
Joseph-
awake.
Steve, we kind
Yeah.
of expected this.
Steve Josephson. The mixed-use future land use category was supposed to encourage uses where you've got, you know, you would have residential and commercial together with, you know, you could have a development where it's either single family or it's more concentrated as apartments, and that would be most of the lot that would be developed, with a small portion of it as, you know, as commercial. And the mixed use was being placed along corridors like Highway 20, you know, Highway 22, so that I think the idea was any new residential development would have commercial development immediately adjacent to it, you know, instead of you put a residential development here, and then all those new residents need to travel elsewhere to, you know, to use a, you know, to go to commercial to do their shopping. The mixed-use category also encouraged the use of planned unit developments, but again, they were meant to be planned unit developments where you had primarily residential. I think it was up to, primarily residential, and then the commercial that served it. And no industrial is permitted in the mixed-use category, which is why they need the future land use, which is why they need the future land use map amendment. But when you look at the future land use map, you will see the mixed use primarily along major arterials.
Okay,
Stephen.
thank you.
And we also had a discussion, Stephen and I, on some of the locations that we have in mixed use. This is a good example. It's a little far from the center of town to support those types of uses, in my opinion.
Pardon the digression. Any
Mr.
questions?
Chairman, I do have a question. On the renderings you have in the back of your packet here, it looks a lot like a steel building in there, but there are some updates. Does that meet the gateway entry corridor overlay concept? Does that meet all the requirements of that?
Yes, we have had several meetings with Walter Hadley. The architects have brought those renderings forward to Mr. Hadley, and I believe he has indicated they meet the intent of that code. There is a decorative steel panel on there. That is the blue panels that you see to help enhance that. The office facility located kind of on the southeast, or excuse me, the northeast portion of that building would be enhanced, have some decorative materials, a decorative entrance, so it would meet the intention of the corridor overlay district.
The materials that they're using are varied enough that they will. It's hard on that because it's a schematic drawing to pull it out, but they are planning and using decorative lighting, our decorative lighting that we've said applies to in that first 400 feet for the entrance and then their site parking lot. And these folks will be in next month with a plat for this particular site as well.
Other questions for Mr. Schrank? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will, again, open this up to the public. Any comments from anybody in the public? Please step forward.
Good morning, everyone. I am Elvin Stockert. I reside right across the highway from this proposed project rezoning. I do not have an issue with the rezoning on it, but we do have some concerns about the noise. I've been living there since 1962. I've grown up and raised my whole life there. And the only concern is they must have an issue when they're working on their tanks. They take like a large sledgehammer and they're banging on the tanks, must be realigning something. And it just sounds like an overgrown bass drum just echoing. And when it happens in the middle of the night, it kind of startles you and wakes you up, you know, especially in the summer months when you have your windows open and cooling the house down. I'm just wondering if we could come up with some solution to like a quiet hour from 10 until 6 in the morning or something like that, just being neighborly. Seems that we are residential right across from it. But other than that, that's my only concern is if we could address the issue of the noise.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Any comments? Would anybody like to address Mr. Stockert's comment?
Yes, thank you. Andrew Schrank again. The owner is aware of some of the noise issues. A few things we have done on the proposed site to help address any noise that would come. Their entire operation will be located within the building, so their manufacturing process is entirely indoors, so sound would be buffered by the building. There are very few doors. If you look at the renderings, I believe there's only one door on the portion of the building that would face their property. The building is located on the southern portion of the site, basically as far away as we can get it from that residential area. We will have tree rows. Actually, there is currently a tree row on the northern end of the property, so those would help buffer any noise as well. I guess as far as existing facility, that operation is there. It is approved. There's nothing really that will be changing at that facility, but hopefully we can help address some of those concerns on our new site.
So I think what you're telling us is that the noise we're talking about is happening outside the existing building?
I would have to refer to the owner on
name is Mike Getz. I work for Worthington Industries. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for allowing us to present to you today. No, currently the noise is within the building. If you can imagine rolling a 50-foot sheet of steel into a hoop, bringing those hoops together in order to get proper alignment, there is the necessity to manhandle these a little bit, use a hammer, use other devices to bring this equipment together. Our intention is to continue that type of operation moving forward, based on demand of the industry, based on demand of our sales. We would potentially need to do that through the evening hours as well. We obviously take it upon ourselves to try to limit that as much as possible, bring as much of that work as we can to the daytime. Like Andrew mentioned, the positioning that we're looking at for this potential building will limit that noise direction in that direction. Our current operation is kind of situated, if you will, to the northwest, aiming the other direction. We have looked at ways to keep those doors closed during the evening hours and do our best to be cognizant of the needs of the community. We have done tree rows, we have done some other measurements that have been brought to our attention in the past, and we will continue to do that. It's our intention to be a good member of the society, of the community, increase our potential employment within the area, and we need to do that by increasing our footprint within our available property. Our current property on the north side doesn't allow us to do any real growth, so we're looking at this southern piece of property to do that.
So am I hearing you say more of the activity that's generating the noise is going to be inside in the future than it is now?
I think it's really about the same. The issue is that they're steel metal buildings, and that's steel and steel reverberates within that building. The building that we're looking at does have, I would say, a much different type of exterior, probably more insulation even than what our current building would have, so that should keep the noise within. We've contracted with Roars, who is working with JLG as a team as well. Like Andrew said, we brought this to roughly 70% completion. We're in the process of reviewing those drawings, reviewing that cost estimates to make a determination of our next steps in this project.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public? All right, we're going to close the public hearing. Comments or questions from commissioners?
Do you normally operate 24 hours, or?
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
Do you normally operate 24 hours, or?
Randy, we're currently, I think we're 2 shifts right now.
I'm Randy, after plant manager.
Mr. Enter, can you come forward, if you would? I just need to get you on record.
Randy, after I'm the plant manager at the facility right now. Right now, we're running a 4-person night shift. That goes till 3:15 in the morning. And then we had been running that night shift for, since we've been building these tanks in 2007, for 11 years.
And the same activities.
Right. This new facility now, we'll be doing a little bit different type of work in that facility. The tanks that we make will still be made in the same facility that we're at. We'll be making some smaller sized stuff, different processes, newer fixtures, better climate control in the building. Our current building right now, in the summertime when it's hot out, the doors stay open just because of the heat in the building. This new facility has a lot more ventilation, and it should be more conducive to having the doors closed, is I guess what I'm saying.
If you don't mind, we're going to assume the current noise is probably going to stay there coming from the existing plant, but in your estimation, would you say that the new location is going to add to the noise? Is there going to be an increase in noise coming out of there? I guess I'm trying to find out, are we going to be doubling the noise amount, the quantity?
It'll be similar work, it'll be metal, you know, steel manufacturing. Right now, we don't plan on, you know, that for many, many years, that facility that we built, we shouldn't need a night shift. But I don't want to look at you guys right now and say we'll never have a night shift there. But, so it should, you know, it's gonna start out, we're sizing it for one shift. But depending on how things continue, you know, we want to be able to run a night shift. And then,
Or, you know, the reason that we want to do this obviously is to respond to customer need, customer demand. We've made a commitment with our acquisition of this facility a few years back, looking to grow those operations, grow the employment base that we have. So we really would, you know, need that availability to be able to run when we need to run to meet the needs of the customer. I don't, you know, we're not looking at, Worthington has several large volume production facilities in different industries. We're not looking at that type of production, sir. It's not a, it's not a high volume, repetitive type of process. These are, you know, unique vessels to unique customers, built on customer, excuse me, on customer demand. And so that just demand ebbs and flows. They may have a high flow this week and might fall off next week. So you need that availability to be able to respond and get the equipment out to the end user as quickly as possible. If not, you lose it. Quite honestly, there's a chance of someone else getting to work, and then that obviously doesn't help us and help the community as well.
Can you tell us, with the existing facility, how many years have tanks been made there, whether it was Worthington or Steffes? How long?
we made our first tank in March of '07.
Worthington did, or Steffes?
Worthington acquired that facility on April 1st of 2014.
So for 11 years or something, there have been
Correct.
tanks made there. Okay. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, we're looking at item 4 right now, the amendment to the future land use designation on this tract. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, a question. Now, I'm not understanding. Is this zoned agricultural or is it zoned currently mixed use?
No, future land use amendment, it's mixed use, it's zoned agricultural. So two different items. Number 4, your future land use amendment, you know, you're going from mixed use to industrial.
Understand that we did not have a future land use map in Dickinson until we did the comprehensive plan. Okay. It's a step before zoning. I look at it as a suggestion as to future use. As a non-planner, that's the way I would say it.
Yeah.
Now, if we were sitting here without them coming in today to request this, and we were looking at that map and we zoned it, what would our recommendation normally be for that area? Would it be?
My personal opinion, I think what would happen is we'd probably get into an extensive discussion about strip zoning, about strip development along the highways. And I don't know that we want to do that today. For one thing, it's really moot with this tract, because from a practical standpoint, right or wrong, we approved an industrial use there when we granted the special use permit a few years ago. So, go ahead, Mrs. Dukert.
I think that the building is going to be an improvement of just looking at the tanks. The tanks have been there forever. And I know why that land was developed for you to begin with, because my husband previously owned Cornerstone, which was Dakota Church Furniture, and we didn't have any land to sell them, so they moved across the street. I'm not sure that Mr. Hondel's going to sell any more land out there. I don't think so. I don't foresee that happening. And I don't know what right we have to do more than this piece.
Well, we're not going to today.
Yeah.
And, you know, if there's a different kind of conversation I think we'd be having if we were looking at more. But today, it's really different than what we looked at up north this morning, because the usage is already there.
Right.
And we approved that. While technically the SUP has expired, we did approve that usage. If there are no more comments or questions, we're looking for a motion on item number 4.
I move the City of Dickens Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of FLM 002-18 FLM amended for mixed use to industrial as depicted in the attachment A and meeting all the requirements of the city's municipal code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the motion carries. We'll move to item number 5, which is the rezoning. Anything else, Mr. Hadley?
Mr. Chairman, the applicant, like I said, will be coming in for a plat this next month, and we'll actually have a development agreement with them, and it will also address one thing that didn't come up, and I think the gentleman that was here, that was a neighbor, there was some concerns on dust in the past, and we've had pretty good discussions with the applicant on minimizing that, routing their trucks through the site and whatnot, so we're going to talk about glare and dust in that development agreement when that comes through too.
I assume the plat will also give some thought to future street widths on whatever that east-west is. What is that?
Yes, I'll address it a little bit. I'll maybe let Mr. Kubis jump in.
No, we don't need to now. I mean, we can keep it for the plat, but
Well, it's fine. It's something that I would totally agree. We do send this to the county because it's in the ETZ and they have the responsibility for it, and they, I believe, have already commented that there's no additional additions to the existing street, which I don't know. If it was in the city, I think Mr. Kubis would ask for something more, so we can definitely look at that when it comes in.
okay. Anything else on this rezoning, Mr. Hadley?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll open this up again to the public for any comment. Anybody have comments or questions? Okay, we see none. We'll close the public hearing. And any comments from commissioners? And if not, a motion. Item number 5.
Well, I make the motion, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of REZ 003-18 zone change from agriculture to limited industrial as depicted in the amendment attachment A and meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move to item number 6, which is a preliminary plat in the Prairie Creek Second Edition. Mr. Hadley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Preliminary plat, Prairie Creek Second Edition, which is a replat of the Prairie Creek development, which where Crossing Restaurant is, corner of 21st and State. A few homes being built out there right now. This replat basically will address reconfiguring some of the lots. There are no zone changes tied to this at this point, but I think there's some utilities that are being reconfigured and addressed. Lighting plans, the roads are in. They're working with engineering. We were trying to get this as a preliminary final, but we're not at that point yet. So the discussion right now is just to replat those and so the developer can start building more homes. I guess there's a number of homes that are going to be built out there this spring and summer. The lots are predominantly larger. There are the number of lots are relatively the same. I let their engineer address that, but I think that there was a block that was created that was a one-lot block, and now it has 6, 7 lots on it. So anyway, they're predominantly single-family. There are some single-family attached in the northeast corner of the development along the city drainage swale.
So, Mr. Hadley, the number of lots increases by 4, it appears, but that's really because of that one large tract that's being split.
Yeah. And they've made some of the other lots larger,
Sure.
but were not really usable.
It's pretty straightforward. Who is representing the owner? Welcome.
Morning. I'm Jeremy Wood with Northern Plains Engineering, and I think Walter did a pretty good job of summarizing. The replat is essentially a replat of Prairie Creek subdivision. As a general rule, the lots were, I think there was 6, I think about 6 lots were eliminated, 8 lots were eliminated, I guess, and which resulted in most of the lots were increased in size just a little bit. All the infrastructure is in place with the exception of the lighting, and also I think the mailboxes have yet to be put in, but the cluster of mailboxes.
And we got that approved by this post office.
So I think that's probably kind of a general summary of it. I can answer any questions regarding the plat or anything else the commission may have.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Jeremy. How big are these, like 7,500 square foot lots?
Generally, they're large. I don't know which area you're kind of looking at, but they're anywhere generally from about 8 to 12,000 square feet.
Just a curiosity question. I assume you're doing this to accommodate a certain kind of floor plan or something?
Just over the years of us being here, we just realized when we first platted it with all the, the R3 and the R2, we just felt we wanted to change it all kind of back to single family, make those more usable lots and get them larger. A lot of people around here like the larger garages and bigger floor plans, so that's why we came in and made this change.
Any more questions of the applicant? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a preliminary plat, so we're going to ask for comments from the public again. Open this up to hearing from the public. Anybody have any questions or comments, please step forward. It appears there are none, so we'll close the public hearing. Anything from commissioners? Not, we need a motion.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of PLP-002-18, preliminary plat for the replat of Prairie Creek subdivision as depicted in attachment A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7 is another preliminary plat in the Lions 4th edition. Mr. Hadley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a Lions 4th, and it's a preliminary replat that's replatting Lions 2nd and 3rd editions. The number of lots, and the chairman has a map that kind of lines out. One of the lots that existed in Lions was one big, long lot, and a lot of that is what's being replatted today for single-family lots. Their intent. This isn't a PUD that was approved, and that particular area was actually designated as more of a medium-density area. The owner is wanting to develop single-family residential in that area and replat not only that large L-shaped lot, but replat some of the cul-de-sac lots as well. We've had some discussions on access to the apartments that are just to the west. There's an emergency access there that was required of 20 or 22 feet wide, I believe, and that will have to stay in place. There's a park that's platted on tract. There's a tract there that's a park that was part of the PUD. That will stay. There's actually an industrial lot out on the front toward the southwest that will actually stay as part of this as well. With the applicant, I guess, have them discuss their future plans. Obviously, they're going to come in with a final plat, and we'll have a development agreement as well for the improvements. They do have a schematic lighting plan as well. There's no lighting out there right now. That's something that hasn't materialized, and they're working with engineering on utilities to consolidate, cap off some of the extra utilities that we have in that area that aren't going to be used.
Okay, thank you. Questions from commissioners? Mr. Hadley, I had posed to you the question about 7th Avenue. And this morning you gave me copies of the previous plattings, so it makes it a little bit clearer. But can you or Mr. Kubis comment on that situation? We're satisfied. It appears that there is 33 feet platted all the way up to, what street is that? To the north? 40, yeah. Is that correct, that we do have 33 feet of platted street all the way to 40?
Chairman Jackson, I believe we have 33 feet to the north end of the, I'll call it just the Lions Edition 1, 2, and 3. And then there's 60 or 66 feet north of that up to 40th.
Okay.
So as part of this, I'll call it the Lions plat again, they dedicated that 33 feet with the intent that if and when property to the east would subdivide, they would dedicate their 33 feet.
You know, the preliminary plat doesn't depict that very well. I assume we'll have that. That really should be shown in the final plat. Is that?
Yeah, we've talked about some line styles there. The corporate limit line is rather large. It kind of blocks what you can see of that. But there is 33 feet dedicated along this row of housing here.
Okay.
And the subdivision to the east, that's just one house, I believe.
There's one house, and then there's another parcel that I don't know if it's even been subdivided, but it would take more than likely multiple subdivisions to happen to the east to dedicate their 33 feet and to make a street actually happen there. But, we've had quite lengthy discussions about, preserving that right of way, but protecting it from becoming a giant parking lot too. So we've talked about some signage that we could put up, barricading, really trying to close that up. The developer's done a nice job fencing off what's been built there today on the east side of this property. And we have a comment that you all have now requesting that that fencing be extended down from this east-west street that's dedicated to the very southern end of the plat. But we don't want people parking their things behind that fence then, so.
Okay. Is the applicant represented here? Mr. Schweitzer, welcome.
Good morning. Corey Schweitzer with Boundary Engineering, representing Profit. They are developing this, and like Mr. Hadley said, it was, basically it was not, there's no lot lines in this. It was one big block that they had planned to put fourplexes, several fourplexes in, and the developer out there has been building the single family, moving the single family, would really like additional single family lots out there to build on. And this is our proposal. I met yesterday with Mr. Kubis and spoke a little bit about that right away for 7th and how we should handle that. I don't know what we'll do about additional 33 feet that would have to be.
Well, I think that's beyond our means right
And it-
now, but like I say, the preliminary plat just really didn't show what we actually have up there. So,
That access that gets into the apartment buildings is gonna stay?
It's there right now, and it's gonna be moved to where it should be. It crosses, it was built across a lot line right now, or it's built outside of their access, their 20-foot access that they have.
Just to clarify that, that
That
was a
was-
requirement of the construction of those apartment buildings from the fire department.
Yeah.
For an access, secondary access.
Chairman Jackson and Commissioner Frederick, what we had talked about yesterday with that access is that, yes, it needs to stay in place. We would like to see that on the final plat come forward as a tract. That would be an access, basically the tract would act as an access easement for whatever the lot and block number is of those apartments, because we really don't require it. It doesn't need to be a city street, it needs to be a private driveway to meet the fire code for that apartment building. So trying not to take on any more street miles than we have already, we'd like to show that as a tract. That would be for the sole purpose of ingress and egress to the apartment buildings.
Would they be required to pave that then?
It is now and it will be in the
Oh, it is,
future.
yeah.
Like Mr. Schweitzer said, it just got paved kind of where it got paved, generally in the area that it's shown on the plat, but not exactly. So it'll need to get
Fixed.
tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
anything else?
Well, it's come up that some of the lots are non-conforming along the cul-de-sac that was previously platted, lots 8, 7, 6. As far as frontages, requests were made by the city staff to look at those. There is a sewer line that we're adding additional easement for, 10 foot on either side, that runs in between lots 7 and 8. Kind of binding us, it's either we get rid of a lot to get our frontages, or we change our boundary of our replat to lot 7 and 8, because he does not wish to delete a lot there. There's no other way to configure the lots to get three lots. We would be losing one in that cul-de-sac. And just some of the discussion we had with Mr. Hadley yesterday.
I think just to clarify, when the PUD was approved and the plat was approved, I'm assuming it was part of the discussion that those lots were as they are. But when you come through the process to replat it now, obviously we have to look at it with our standards now, since we're re-looking at it. So yeah, they do need to make a decision. We could amend the PUD, I guess, if they want to do that, to include that, or they could just leave the lots the way they are and draw the line on the replat
And the
further
lots
to the
have
west.
not changed in that area.
Yeah.
It's basically the same. The reason it went down into the cul-de-sac was to get additional easement for the sanitary sewer that runs through there.
Any questions for Mr. Schweitzer?
Chairman Jackson, if I could, one other thing, through this process of the replat, obviously, a lot of these utilities have been installed, and I would say, similar to the Prairie Creek subdivision, we've worked with both engineers, attempting to get a set of water and sewer services to each lot. There was some multifamily lots here that are now being split into single-family lots, and I think we've seen plans, preliminarily at least, for this subdivision that are providing those separate services. And we're still working towards that on Prairie Creek. We didn't discuss it with that Prairie Creek replat, but Boundary has provided plans that do show providing those separate services to each one of these lots now, which I think is absolutely the correct thing to do instead of sheeting off and trying to provide services to multiple single-family homes from a single service line, which could be problematic in the future.
Yes, everything was installed 4 years ago, water, sewer, streets up to that Seventh Street. So water, sewer services are all in. They're 4-inch water services to go into a multi. We'll have to choke them down and use what we can. The other ones will have to be capped. And new services dug in for the lots that aren't serviced.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I guess my only concern with the road and stuff in there, and this is probably, as you representing this subdivision, with snow removal, basically a dead end, are we gonna receive a bunch of calls because, much like some of our outlying subdivisions that we receive calls on, they're low priority because we have to clear certain areas. With the cul-de-sac basically dead ending and our snow removal equipment, how it operates, how we're gonna push snow out of there. I guess that would be a concern.
Yeah, every cul-de-sac is gonna create that problem, but with Seventh being there, maybe we can use that until it gets built out as snow storage and push it down that little street that's platted. I'm not sure.
I just, something, like I said, maybe it's more Mr. Zeroff's concern, but
right.
Just to bring it up before.
We did discuss that, and, the extension of the public right-of-way going to the east, that we're gonna block off because we don't want people parking behind it. That, for now, that would be a logical place to push the snow, and then the track that Craig was talking about for access to the apartments, that is envisioned, that obviously when they plow the apartments, they would plow that. So whatever they did with the snow there, that would move. Hopefully, I guess, to the apartments, but I'm gonna assume it'd probably go to the east.
I'm assuming this picture is what we're trying to avoid.
Right.
Yep.
The parking lot?
No, that would, construction and debris blowing. The fence was put up to the north of the portion that's built out right now, north of Seventh. It is intended to, spoke with Mr. Kuntz and told him the similar fence will be, or identical fence will be continued down to the southern portion of the property line. That is in the development agreement.
For the existing lots.
For the
Yeah,
existing
and then
lots, and
we
this
will
is,
have-
basically we're following that development agreement.
We'll have to revisit that development agreement and then add whatever else
Yep.
that we're having. Obviously, the lighting, they have a schematic plan for that already. And we'll add some things to that development agreement and bring it with the final plat.
Right.
Anything else? Thank you.
Gene?
All right. right, this is a preliminary plat, so we'll open the public hearing. Anybody who has comments, please step forward and make those comments. Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Any more questions or comments from commissioners? Not, look for motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of PLP 00218 preliminary plat for the replat of Prairie Creek subdivision as depicted in Attachment A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not, we'll vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
For clarification, was this with regards to item number 7 or number 6?
6.
6?
This is number 7. This is.
So that would be the Lions 4th edition.
Correction.
I think we have the wrong motion in our packet.
Yeah, we have the motion for 6.
Yeah, we have Prairie.
Okay, I didn't catch that. Mr. Karski, your motion was intended to pertain to the Lions 4th, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
And the second, Mrs. Dukart?
Yes.
We're talking about agenda item number 7, the Lions 4th edition. Okay. Let's see, we'll move to item number 8. Ms. Murtha, you're going to lead that discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. With regards to the note that says that I'm recommending approval, I just wanted to confirm and clarify that the changes that have been proposed in this ordinance revision are reflective of policy decisions. There's no recommendation with regards to those policy decisions, simply that the changes have been brought forward to you in a format that is appropriate for the code, and should the changes be approved, they would be legally compliant. So I can walk you through the changes here. If I know this particular draft has been before you before, but I can walk the commission through if that is the wishes of the commission at this time.
I think in summary fashion, that would be fine.
The section 1 intended to take out some references to some requirements, and at the suggestion of Commissioner Frederick, add a notation that addressed the occupancy permit issue that had been coming up and had been expressed as a concern by the building official. With regards to section 2, this again was a slight revision to clarify the applicability of the landscaping requirements. Section 3, this was the, again, it kind of clarifying where the materials would be planted, and confirming that the planted materials would be on a list that would be maintained by the city so as to allow for some flexibility with regards to the types of materials on that list, as opposed to putting it into ordinance. The table 8.1 was updated. Section 4, this might be I think the most discussed provision with regards to identifying where the trees and the number of trees to be planted in any individual property. And then with regards to section 5, just for clarification, under the obstruction of view provision, this isn't adding a requirement necessarily as so much as it is referring to another section of the code that already addresses obstructions of view, and indicating that this landscaping ordinance should work in conjunction with that obstruction of view ordinance that's already in 39.07.002. And then updating throughout the ordinance, you'll see references, changing decisions from, for example, the Public Works Director to the City Engineer, from also incorporating the City Forester into a person who is making decisions. And that was at the recommendation of staff and looking at where their duties lie and who would be the most appropriate person to handle those inquiries. The City Forester position has not yet been filled, but it has been advertised. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or refer any questions to Mr. Hadley and Mr. Kubis, depending on what they are.
Okay, just for clarification, it appears that no changes have been made since our last meeting.
That is correct.
Okay.
And it was my understanding that there was no changes being requested to the draft, just that there had been discussion and not necessarily consensus on the draft. However, there was no recommended changes to it.
Okay, and we are at a point today that we are going to take action on this and make a recommendation to City Commission on the ordinance as written or amended. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Comments, questions?
Only a clarification. I mean, when I read this, it says requirements a minimum of 1 tree in the front yard and 2 trees on any street side yard on a corner lot. So does that mean a corner lot has 3 trees or 2 trees?
3 trees, I believe.
So it's clarifying the 1 tree in the front and 2 trees on the side is the max on a corner lot. So it'd actually be 3 per corner lot. Whereas right now, I think it varies from 6 to 8,
Yeah.
potentially, depending on size of the lot.
Other comments? Okay, this is a zoning ordinance change, so we are going to open up to the public for any comments again, or questions. Anybody want to comment on this ordinance amendment? Appears there are no comments, so we close the public hearing. Anything else from commissioners?
So is this the official end of temporary occupancy certificates?
For this item, yes. Can't speak for the building department, sir, but yes, it's going to be a notes for this. There will just be notes on the CO, final CO, and there'll be a follow-up. So I'm assuming that's what we're moving toward. Ms. Murtha might.
That is my understanding. I know Mr. Schwinn isn't here today to be able to absolutely confirm that what his department will be doing, but from the basis from our discussions, yes, this, with regards to landscaping requirements, this would be the end.
No, it took 5 years. That's not bad.
Well, and I think he represented that to us the best.
Yeah, no.
Mr. Chairman, we've spent hours and hours on this tree planting, and we're still back at 3 trees in the front yard on a corner lot. How did I thought we were saying we weren't going to do this.
No, it's 1 tree in the front yard. 1 tree on every lot in the front yard, and if you have a corner lot, it's 2 trees on the side yard of that corner lot. So it's 1 in the front on every lot and 2 on the side.
So 3 trees
3
on
trees.
a corner lot.
Yes.
3 trees on a corner lot. Only corner lots.
And today's ordinance would say how many?
There's a long,
Depending on the size, if you could 6, I mean, Jason, I think you
you
planted
need
6.
an algebra specialist to figure out the formula, but.
At least 6 would be.
But it's usually like 6 or 7.
Wow.
So it's half. It's easily half,
Of the current.
almost all lots, yes. That's correct.
I don't have any, as a contractor in town, I don't have any issue with this one. The old one was always an issue, but.
And clear and understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments? Okay, I look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend, or I move to approve the ordinance as drafted by the Planning and Zoning Commission and recommend approval or presentation to the Dickinson City Commission.
We have a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? Not, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So this will go to City Commission for what? Next meeting?
Yes.
Which is when?
April 3rd.
April 3rd. Okay, that takes care of our regular agenda for the day. We have a couple of work session items that Mr. Kubis would like to discuss.
Thank you, Chairman Jackson. The first item is in your packet. The second item, I do have a handout for you that I'll get you in a second. This was a proposed right-of-way vacation that we had initiated last year. There was a lot split in the area. It was noted that this right-of-way was never built out, platted in the 80s, I suppose. So we did follow through with the lot split, and it split that big triangular lot that's shown on here. And we wrote to the applicant who was requesting that lot split that it was our intent to propose to vacate this right-of-way. It obviously can go nowhere now with the platting that's occurred onto the north. A lot of this right-of-way is in the floodplain. In fact, the city owns the lots that are in the floodplain. You can see those. They're listed if you start at 15th Street, which is the street towards the bottom of this proposed right-of-way vacation. So the city owns lots 0900, 0800, 0700, I think all the way to 0300. But so we could become a part owner of this vacated right-of-way by state statute. When a right-of-way is vacated, each side of the vacated right-of-way gets half. I guess my question to you would be, is this an area where the city would want to take half, or would we want to essentially give up our right to that half of the right-of-way and give it all to the private side, or at least request that the private side of that take all the right-of-way? We do have one small plan down here for future infrastructure, and that would be a shared use path or a recreational trail along this waterway. I believe, we haven't had any design on this, but I do believe if the trail did end up on, it'll end up somewhere within the floodplain. And if it ended up on the west side of the floodplain, we still own those city lots. We'd have plenty of room to construct the trail there. The other benefit of giving up our right-of-way is that it would, of course, go on the tax rolls then for those property owners. So we'd like to bring this forward to you. It'll probably take a little bit of drawing since there are a few parcels that abut this right-of-way and have to show exactly who will be getting what. But just wondering what your thoughts were on the city taking the half that's entitled to us as the adjacent landowner.
Everybody understand the issue?
I would just offer for the purpose of discussion that probably it wouldn't be a pure give up. There would have to be some remuneration exchange so that it wasn't a gift to the property owner. But given the fact that the city would then be getting property back on the tax rolls, the small price would reflect that.
So we're gonna ask them to take it, pay for it, and then pay taxes, Steve?
Yeah.
Just quit claiming it.
Sounds like a heck of a deal.
Mr. Kubis, the 0401 that's in there,
Yes,
what was the purpose of that?
that's a great question. This came, Mr. Jackson's laughing, maybe he knows more than I do. It came after the initial platting of this, I think it was Prairie Hills third or fourth. And I believe the intent was to be the access parcel for that lot on the top of the hill, but there may have been some other, let's say it has a shaded history a little bit. I think that the ownership, though, of parcel 0400 and 0401 are the same ownership.
This plat was done at the end of the last boom in the early 80s. And there are at least 2, maybe 3 replats in this area. And in the process of replatting, it just got all carved up. And it ended up with this little sliver.
I was just wondering if it's something the city owns and we had it for easement to run.
No.
So it's not.
No.
I just, to me, why you'd have a lot slivered like that with.
Yeah, I think, per our code and the minimum requirements for widths and everything, I don't think it would be a buildable lot to do anything. There'd probably be a forthcoming lot combination to carve this up a little bit differently.
The access road to the old Koslecki property on top of the hill there runs right through it. So,
As happens in boom times, owners and developers end up changing their mind pretty regularly because it's such a fast-moving.
He doesn't own, the owner on the hill does not own that piece. He has an easement for his road.
Yeah. It's the guy that owned the house before.
mhm.
I can't remember his name.
I just went through this whole thing with him. He had to refinance to get this all straightened out.
Well, and I think that's a good point, and that's the reason really why we wrote that memo and attached it, gave it to the owner when they requested the lot split, is saying, we have no intent to build Prairie Creek Road as it was platted here. This was, I think in some master plan was meant to tie into Prairie Creek Road, which ends in a cul-de-sac now at the top of the hill to the north, and there's obviously no way that's ever going to happen now. Homes are built. And even then, this right-of-way would sit fairly low. It wouldn't provide access. You'd need, a tractor to get from there up to that house. And so it would be in our best interest just to divest ourselves of this right-of-way. And whether we keep it as a part of a parcel, but the right-of-way implies some things that aren't going to happen up there.
I agree.
I guess my feeling, being a member of this board, is whatever you guys think. I think either way, whatever the best way to clean this thing up, if it's giving it to adjacent property owners, fine. The city keeps it as part of the other properties the city has. I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other.
I was just thinking, if we're looking at this as a whole, maybe the suggestion would also be for that one, lot 400401, maybe talk to the adjacent landowners, and if there's interest to replat or absorb that into the existing property while still providing an easement. So the person has access on the hill.
Certainly, they'll all need to be notified as part of the vacation process.
I think it's Lee Pavlicek that owns the other ones, I think.
Yeah, I'd have to look. Pretty sure. But we'll move forward then. We'll work with Ms. Murtha, make sure that we're, following the application process correctly. It's kind of unique that the city will be applying for this. Usually we see it from a third party that applies for city right-of-way to be vacated. In this case, we'll be the applicant, so. But we hope to bring that forward to you shortly.
Okay.
The next item, I'd like to, some handouts. Thanks. It's just an issue that's came up a few times, and it's on some either old plat that we've approved, I shouldn't say old, but recently approved, or a proposed plat that you haven't seen yet, that we've seen come in the door in a preliminary fashion. And so I'd make a note here. I have two captions on these, and they got flip-flop, and I apologize. The one caption is for a proposed subdivision. That's up by the middle school on the north side of town. If I can steal that. So that's the bottom one, is a proposed subdivision in the slightly darker blue square. You can see the big building is the middle school along 21st Street. And then the white dot just below and to the left of that dark blue square is our new water tower on the northwest side of town. And so when we have proposed subdivisions come in like this, they're adjacent to the city limits. They're on the edge, but adjacent to our corporate limits. And we as staff need to talk to these applicants about annexation or no annexation, and just wanted to get a feel for this from this board. If I could explain the top photo again, the caption are flip-flop, but this was the approved South Park second subdivision on South Highway 22. Again, adjacent to city limits. Right to the north is Wind Construction's office and shops. This was platted and approved with what appears to be all the intent in the world to annex, and it never did. Again, tail end of the boom. There was a lot of annexation proposed on the south side of town in this quarter section. And so these 6 lots, the 4 red ones and the dark blue one, are platted adjacent to city limits but not annexed. And so every time there's a building permit being issued here, this goes through the county. We get a request from Southwest Water, and that blue lot actually has a building on it now. We get a request from Southwest Water saying, hey, this is in your area of influence. We have an agreement with Southwest Water that we signed last year. We don't have water at this subdivision south of town. We have it close. Wynn is obviously served by city water. And at this point, we kind of defer to Southwest Water. It's outside of the city limits. We don't have water and sewer there. Once it's served with water, though, a lot of these people, depending on the soils, they're fine with a septic tank, at least initially, and a drain field. This is going to be a very difficult property to annex in the future, especially once it's built on. Maybe right now, we would have the opportunity to do that. There's still those 4 red lots are platted, not annexed to the city. Do we as staff want to reach out to these folks and say, hey, we think something slipped through the crack here a few years ago. We would really like to annex this property. And again, kind of initiate what usually comes through an application from a third party, initiated as staff to annex things like this. Conversely, the plat, that's the upcoming proposed plat, just to the west of the middle school, we have city water there. And they've indicated to us that they're not interested in annexation. Well, being interested in it and being in the city's best interest might be 2 different things. And I was hoping to get some feedback from the board on this issue. It seems like with our water system build out, we certainly have the capacity to make a lot of these services. especially in this area, like the water tower's right there. We have a water main that runs literally right in front of the property, adjacent to it.
Is there sewer there though?
There's sewer up to and north of the middle school. So the sewer is, how many feet that is away? Probably about 1,000 feet away, 800 feet. And the intent was, that the Pinecrest addition where the tree rows are would have had sewer if it would have built out. You see a right-of-way that goes north. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a platted right-of-way that would come right up to 21st Street that would have had sewer in it if they would have built out. So.
What are they looking to do there? I mean, residential subdivision?
Yeah, it's residential, a family thing, rural residential. And I'm not so concerned about the zoning right here. More about the thought of, is this our chance to annex? Do we want to? Do we want to limit ourselves to what we have now? It's a big policy thing. We also have, issues of where we have people that are requesting services that are way outside of our corporate limits, and they understand that we have the capacity now to handle a lot of sewer, and most people are content with their Southwest Water Service, I would say, but have trouble with the drain field now and then and say, boy, would the city take my sewer? And these are, really planning questions that I think we get, there hasn't been a hard and fast proposal put to us yet, but discussions have been had on doing this. And maybe we're okay with the idea of limiting our corporate limits and servicing people with utilities, but maybe we shouldn't be.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kubis, I know there has been discussions. If you look to the west there's a large parcel that one time was intended.
Which one are you talking about?
On the bottom. But you can see that flagpole's up.
The corporate limits go up, there's another
Right.
quarter land.
And there has been talks to take that out of, we annex that and then take that out of our city limits. Because I think the feeling is we've spread out a little bit too much. So my concern, if they have no interest in becoming part of, the city, then, and we're talking to the neighbor to the west about pulling it out.
Right.
And then, kind of we're asking you to come in, but we're asking the other developer to come out. So I guess I have some concern with that.
And to be clear, we haven't asked them to be annexed, and certainly that's, I don't feel staff's place. We've just had it be indicated from them that, they don't have an interest in being annexed. And I think, again, maybe content with Southwest Water.
How big is that parcel? 16 acres, 20 acres?
I think smaller than that, probably 10 total.
10.
Yeah.
Eight,
And
I think
do
it's eight, I remember.
Do I understand
think
right
it's
that
eight.
they're just going to build a home there?
No, it's a family, the entire family owns that area, and it's a in-law, and then they're gonna create one other lot for another family member, but there's an in-law that's gonna build a home there this year, hopefully.
So is it going to be subdivided?
Yeah, it'll be a
Yes.
plat.
It's a parcel right now. There's a home and some outbuildings, and the intent was to make 2 lots out of the 1 parcel.
So at a minimum, they'll have to have 2-acre lot.
5.
Or is it 5 now with the?
It's 2 with the separate.
1.
Well, I think it's 5. I think we went from 2 to 5, right? Or
It's 1.
If it's in the, I'm sorry, Commissioner Steve Josephson, if it's within the extraterritorial zone, it's going to be whatever the city zoning would allow. However, having said that, if they're not on central sewer, they've got to have, I think state law is what,
40,000.
40,000 square feet, but I know that in talking to Southwest Health, they think 60,000's a better number.
what they think
Yeah,
and
but
what is the law.
They're going to have it, they have to have at least 40,000.
Okay.
40,000 square feet, so usually these subdivisions come in, they're usually 1-acre lots or larger.
Right.
And I guess Engineer Kubis brings up a point is, yeah, it's in the extraterritorial zone right next to an area that's in the city where you would have an emphasis on more density. You know, the county doesn't have a comment on this because, you know, we leave it up to the cities in terms of annexation and so on. The thing I would just wonder is practically, if you provided service out to those lots in the ETZ, how would you price it? You know, how would you price it versus providing services to city, you know, to city that's just the only observation I would make.
I mean, are we gonna ask them to come in and then run a line out there and special them?
Well, in
They
this
have a
case,
line.
for water, the line is there.
Not sewer.
Possibly, yeah.
You know, I guess my feeling is, I'm not sure you can compare this to what's to the west there, Scott, because those folks asked to come in.
Right.
Now, you know, it was a misjudgment on all of our part.
Right.
At that time. But if these folks were asking for water and sewer, I would say absolutely. We need to subdivide it, we need to annex it, absolutely, before we give water and sewer. We did have a policy at one time that anything contiguous, we would require annexation. But I'm not sure this meets the spirit of that with nothing developed to the south and the east, really. So
We have one standing home in that whole
Yeah,
area.
Yeah. So, you know, if that quarter in the northwest quadrant of that intersection would be developed, I assume we'd bring it in as that was being developed, but that's a long way off, probably. So I wouldn't see a reason to do it for this particular parcel. I think it's important that this annexation question, you know, some people have heard the term land grab by the city, and we don't look at it that way. It's a tool for managing our growth, is what it is. But I wouldn't see the necessity here. The one at the top of the page, Craig and I talked about this a while back. You know, those lots along Highway 22 were platted at the same time we had a large plat for that whole quarter. That's the old Provatsky property. And we had a plat covering the whole property, and I think maybe we approved a preliminary plat for the entire quarter.
There may have been, there was two plats ongoing, the one in kind of the northwest part of that quarter where the 3 apartment buildings are. That was approved as South Park first, and then where it's shown as nothing built in these squares was South Park second. But the annexation, we have some email correspondence that the applicant wanted to annex, and they were the annexation was going to be this northeast quarter of whatever section it is, minus the Johnson subdivision and the Wynn subdivision. They were going to annex the whole thing, and when it came forward, it was just South Park first. And so South Park second and the rest of that quarter kind of just went away for some reason.
It became apparent, in my opinion, you know, we asked them to plan that entire quarter so it made sense, so we could look at the whole total development. I think that was the right thing to do, but it became apparent that the only thing they were going to do a final plat on were the 2 areas that Craig is talking about. I remember a lot of conversation about the area along the highway because it's really difficult to serve with sewer unless you were to plat the whole quarter. If you plat the whole quarter and run sewer, then it's much easier to get sewer to those lots.
And there was a lot of that discussion in meeting minutes. From what I could find, none of that really materialized into a sewer plan. And so it's still, the fact remains that it's still difficult to serve these properties along Highway 22 with sewer.
But they did lay out their sewer, and they proved to us that they could get sewer to these lots along the highway. But now that the rest of it isn't platted, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't without some unusual sewer consideration.
Chairman Jackson, just, and one other thing I just wanted to add is, since any of this took place, you know, we do have policies in place if somebody wants to come in, if they want service. We do have an urban service area, some of which covers area actually out annexation process goes through the whole process of, do we have enough capacity to actually serve, development, development in that area. I just wanted to add that.
I know there was a lot of resistance at planning and zoning at the time to plat that area because of the sewer issue. Plat that area along the highway. I was surprised when Craig told me that it did get platted. And apparently it was recorded, huh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the first lot, that larger lot, is, 3/4 of it is unbuildable, or without doing a lot of floodplain filling, it's unbuildable. The other three are fairly buildable. But even the minutes and the conditions that were placed on approval, really speak to the fact that this was going to be annexed, that before any building, there's a little right-of-way on the south side of this, and then that gap in between the two, the second and third lots is supposed to be street right-of-way. It kind of lines up with streets on the other side of Highway 22, that they should be built and constructed to city engineer's approval. Well, it's not in the city, so we really have no approval to give to these constructions, so.
And Craig, that building just south of the blue tract, that's a relatively new building, right?
That is, if I'm remembering right, that's Platinum Motorsports, and then the lot that's shaded in blue has actually been built on this last year. For what purposes, I'm not really sure. But that's where it came on to my radar, is we got the request from Southwest Water saying, this is in the city's serviceable area, however it was referred to in our agreement between the city and Southwest Water. And do you have an issue with Southwest Water servicing this parcel? And so at the time, we don't have a water main down there right now. We have nothing in our CIP plan to extend a water main down there. So Southwest Water is either servicing or will be servicing that parcel in blue shortly.
I would think they probably have a septic tank in already. The building's up.
Probably,
yeah. Yeah, they could.
Another thing that people mistakenly think is that just because an area is annexed, that the city owes that area water and sewer. Well, everybody pays for their own water and sewer. It's not paid for by property taxes. One way or the other, that's a cost of newly development. If this was a new subdivision, I'd probably be leaning towards getting it annexed, but it's not. For whatever reason went by us, and I don't know that it's worth the effort today.
And I think Stephen made a good point that we do have the urban service boundary. We probably haven't, maybe it didn't get as much thought as it should have, really digging a little bit deeper into the engineering of it. But when we would have plats that, we liked, we'd extend the urban service boundary. And I think we need to take a closer look at that and use that as, like Stephen said, it's a tool to help guide annexation, I think. It's saying, hey, this one's really going to be difficult, either for the city or for the developer, and it's probably just too big of a hurdle to climb. Or where there's other areas, I think we've all found through some planning efforts back with the West Area Plan, was that the west side of Dickinson was just more easily serviceable. That's why we looked that way for growth, from an engineering standpoint.
Wouldn't this fall into our overlay district, or our minimum requirements within the 400 feet? I mean, that's just a steel building. I mean,
the problem there.
Oh, they have decorative. They did. If you go look at it, they actually did put the rock on the bottom.
And I'm not saying we didn't look at it, but just the way our arrangement is right now with the county is, this is just a parcel out in the county. It's in our ETC, but the building permit and that application goes through the county channel, not through the city's channel. So I don't know when.
We have to sign off on it.
Yeah,
I sign off.
yeah, and just to add to those comments is, if from the county perspective, if there's something in the ETZ, if a permit shows up, we send them back to the city, and we tell them, you need to give us, there's an extraterritorial zone compliance letter that the city writes and signs that says that, you know, that what they have there meets what's in the zoning code. And there have actually been times when Planning Director Hadley has sat down with people and said, this is in our corridor, so make these improvements to the building. Commissioner Friedrich, they do allow metal buildings in the overlay district. However, they have to have a significant amount of cover. You know, there has to be, I think it's up to 70% metal, and then the rest of it has to be, you know, some sort of, you know, whatever the requirements, you know, the requirements are. But yet, many times they'll go and sit down with Planning Director Hadley, and he'll look at their site plans and tell them the city requires that you do this and that, and then he signs off on the letter and sends it back to the county for review.
Well, I appreciate the comments, and if there's any more, please feel free. There were some issues, you know, some that were past issues and some that I think will be presented before us shortly, and just wanted to bring them to your attention and give us a little guidance.
Just one more comment about the annexation issue. You only have to look across Montana, where there's kind of an anti-zoning bent in many places, where you see rural subdivisions outside of city limits that were built contiguous to the city, in many cases provided city water and even some sewer, and the city is now surrounded by those developments that they can't annex. And they've already got water and sewer. People have no incentive to annex anymore, and it causes a real problem. So we have to be careful with that. Anything else for this meeting? Is there something on the back page?
The theater.
Nothing on the back page, Steve.
Well, there's a theater city parking lot alley vacation as a discussion item.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Well,
Oh, I missed that too.
We can keep it really short. I think it was discussed a little bit last night at the commission meeting. At one point through the purchase agreement development process between the city and the movie theater, we were asked to replat that property. It's obviously a bunch of old 25-foot lots like was traditional in the downtown area. The theater's taking a portion of that. The city would have 2 remainder parcels, so we were going to go through the replat process. Through discussions with them, I think this was a great change of direction, that they're going to lead the replat process. City's still the owner of the parcel, and we'll need to be a signature to that parcel, but they're doing the work, carving out the parcel that they need. I don't really want to be responsible for being that 1-inch shop, like we said, in the downtown area with 0 setbacks. So they have engaged an engineer to do a survey, and they're looking for additional survey requirements that we weren't willing to do. So there will be a replat coming forward of that half block, but the city won't be leading the charge. It's going to be Odyssey.
Is the theater purchase consummated?
It's close.
It's very close. So and I can elaborate on that for you. Part of the issue that we were having is that the purchase agreement contains very specific timeframes and obligations. Well, when we started negotiating the purchase agreement as Mr. Quist had mentioned, at the onset of it, the intent was that the city proceed with the replat. Well, partway through our negotiation process, Odyssey decided that it made sense for them to lead with the replat, and we had to then take into consideration the timing of bringing that before this commission and then going to the city commission, and the fact that the time frames in the purchase agreement needed to reflect this process, because
Okay.
that was part of their due diligence process.
But my question is, this will be a deed, it won't be a contract?
It will be a deed.
It's going to be
It will be a
transferred?
deed. Yes, so the purchase agreement is anticipated to be on the city commission agenda in April, either the first or second meeting. And then the replat is anticipated to come before you in May. Is that, do I have my timeframes right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We are adjourned.
Yeah.
If you didn't get a chance